You've been asking for money your entire life, praying for it, visualizing it, affirming it into existence, begging the universe to send you what you need. You've been operating from the fundamental assumption that money exists somewhere out there. And if you can just find the right combination of words, the right energy, the right technique, then maybe, just maybe, it will flow towards you. But what if I told you that every moment you spend asking for money, you're actually pushing it away from you? What if the very act of asking creates the energetic signature of lack that ensures money remains exactly where you don't want it to be, everywhere except in your experience? What if money isn't something you ask for, but something you pull? Not through force, not through manipulation, but through a fundamental shift in how you relate to the quantum field of abundance that's already surrounding you right now. You see, there's a secret that wealthy people know, whether they're conscious of it or not, that completely changes how money moves in their reality. They don't ask for money. They don't beg for money. They don't even think about money the way most people think about money. They pull money. And today, you're going to learn exactly how that works. Here's what no one tells you about money. It's not a thing. It's not an object floating around in the universe waiting to land in your bank account. Money is a frequency. Money is energy. Money is consciousness expressing itself through form. And the moment you understand this, really understand this, everything about your financial reality begins to shift. But here's where it gets interesting. Most people are walking around broadcasting the wrong frequency. They're operating from what I call the asking frequency, a vibrational state that says, I don't have, therefore I need. And the quantum field, being the perfect mirror that it is, reflects back exactly that. Not having, therefore needing. The asking frequency is rooted in separation. It assumes that you are here and money is there, and somehow you need to bridge that gap through petition, through request, through some external force deciding you're worthy enough to receive. But consciousness doesn't work that way. Reality doesn't work that way. Let me explain what's really happening every time you ask for money. When you ask, you're positioning yourself as separate from what you're asking for. You're literally encoding the energetic message, I am not that which I seek. And the field responds accordingly, maintaining that exact relationship, you remaining separate from what you're seeking. This is why people can spend years, decades, asking for money and wondering why nothing changes. They're trapped in what I call the asking loop, a self-perpetuating cycle where the very act of asking reinforces the lack that created the asking in the first place. But wealthy consciousness operates from a completely different frequency. It operates from what I call the pulling frequency, a vibrational state that says, I am that which I seek, and I'm simply calling it into form. When you pull money, you're not asking an external force to give you something you don't have. You're recognizing that abundance is the fundamental nature of consciousness itself, and you're simply aligning with that truth and drawing it into your experienced reality. Think of it this way. Imagine you're standing in a room filled with radio waves, thousands of different frequencies broadcasting simultaneously. Now you can't hear any of them until you tune your radio to a specific frequency. The radio waves aren't being sent to you when you tune in. They're already there, already present, already broadcasting. Your radio is simply receiving what's already available. Money works exactly the same way. There are infinite streams of abundance flowing through the quantum field right now. Infinite possibilities for wealth, for resources, for financial flow. But you can only receive the frequencies you're tuned to. And most people have their inner radio tuned to the frequency of lack, of asking, of not having. When you learn to pull money, you're learning to retune your inner radio to the frequency of abundance. You're not asking the universe to change. You're changing your receptivity to what the universe is already offering. Let that sink in for a moment. The universe isn't withholding money from you. You're unconsciously broadcasting a frequency that money cannot reach. But here's where everything changes. There's a specific way that consciousness interfaces with the quantum field to create what we experience as money. And it has nothing to do with asking, and everything to do with what I call coherent assumption. Coherent assumption is when every level of your being, your thoughts, your emotions, your body, your energy field, aligns with a specific reality as if it's already true. Not hoping it will become true. Not believing it might become true. Assuming it is true right now, and allowing that assumption to inform how you move through the world. When you assume something at a coherent level, you don't need to ask for it. You simply pull it towards you through the natural magnetism of aligned consciousness. Most people think manifestation is about convincing the universe to give them something. But true manifestation, quantum manifestation, is about becoming so coherent in your assumption of having something that the universe has no choice but to reflect that back to you. Not because you convinced it, but because that's how consciousness works. Consciousness always creates its own reflection. So here's the question. What would it feel like if money was already flowing to you in the exact way you need it to flow? Not what would it feel like if it happened someday. What does it feel like right now in this moment, assuming that the financial reality you desire is already in motion? Can you feel the difference? When you ask for money, there's a subtle tension, a reaching, an energetic signature of incompleteness. But when you assume money is already flowing, there's a relaxation, a settling, an energetic signature of completion. That settling, that relaxation, that's the pulling frequency. That's what draws money into your reality. But let's go deeper. There's a specific practice that transforms asking into pulling, and it starts with understanding what money actually is at the quantum level. At the deepest level, money is crystallized attention. It's consciousness that has been focused, organized, and given form. Every dollar that exists in your reality represents someone's attention, someone's creativity, someone's contribution of consciousness to the collective field. When you understand this, you realize that generating money isn't about convincing external forces to give you something. It's about learning to crystallize your own attention in ways that naturally create value, naturally create flow, naturally create exchange. If this understanding is shifting something in your awareness right now, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Not just for more content, but to stay aligned with this frequency of conscious abundance that we're exploring together. Here's the practice that changes everything. Instead of asking for money, start asking this question. How can I give my attention in a way that naturally generates the financial flow I desire? This question shifts you from the asking frequency to the pulling frequency, because it positions you as the source of what you seek, not the recipient of what you lack. When you ask how you can give your attention in value-creating ways, you start to notice opportunities that were invisible from the asking frequency. You start to see possibilities for contribution, for service, for creative expression that naturally generate financial exchange. But here's what's really happening energetically. When you focus on giving your attention in value-creating ways, you're aligning with the fundamental nature of money itself. You're becoming coherent with the frequency that money naturally resonates with. Money flows toward consciousness that's creating value. Money flows toward attention that's being given in service of life, in service of others, in service of the greater good. Not because the universe rewards good behavior, but because that's the natural direction that consciousness moves when it's expressing through the form we call money. So instead of asking, "How can I get money?" start asking, "How can I create such value that money naturally flows to me?" Feel the difference in your body as you ask these two questions. The first question creates tension, reaching, grasping. The second question creates expansion, creativity, possibility. The second question puts you in the pulling frequency. Now let's talk about what happens when you start operating from the pulling frequency consistently. First, you stop experiencing the emotional charge around money. When you're asking for money, there's always an underlying anxiety, a fear that it won't come, a desperation that pushes money away. But when you're pulling money, there's a calm confidence, an inner knowing that financial flow is inevitable because you're aligned with the principles that create it. Second, opportunities start appearing that you never noticed before. Not because new opportunities are being created, but because your perception is now tuned to the frequency where these opportunities live. Remember, you can only see what you're vibrationally compatible with. Third, your relationship with money itself begins to transform. Instead of seeing money as something scarce, something you need to compete for, something that might not be available for you, you start experiencing money as a natural expression of the value you're creating in the world. But perhaps most importantly, you stop feeling powerless in your financial reality. When you're asking for money, you're always waiting for something external to change. When you're pulling money, you're always in creative relationship with the forces that generate financial flow. Let me share with you the most powerful money-pulling technique I know. It's deceptively simple, but when practiced consistently, it completely rewires your relationship with abundance. Every morning, before you start your day, ask yourself this question: what value can I create today that would naturally generate the financial flow I desire? Don't think about the answer. Feel for the answer. Let the question drop into your body and notice what wants to emerge. Maybe it's making a phone call you've been avoiding. Maybe it's finishing a project you've been procrastinating on. Maybe it's having a conversation with someone in your network. Maybe it's simply showing up more fully to whatever work is already in front of you. The key is to follow whatever emerges, not because you're trying to make money, but because you're aligning with the creative intelligence that naturally generates financial flow. Then, as you move through your day, instead of thinking about money, think about value. Instead of focusing on what you want to receive, focus on what you want to give. Instead of asking, "What's in it for me?" ask, "What can I offer that would genuinely serve?" This isn't about being selfless or giving your energy away. This is about aligning with the fundamental principle that governs financial flow. Money moves toward consciousness that's creating value. When you consistently focus on creating value, you develop what I call abundance magnetism, a natural capacity to draw financial opportunities, resources, and flow into your experience without effort, without force, without asking. But here's what most people miss about this process. It's not a technique. It's not a strategy. It's a way of being. It's a fundamental shift in how you relate to your own creative power and to the abundance that's always surrounding you. You see, the universe is constantly offering you infinite pathways to financial flow. But most people are so focused on asking for money that they miss the opportunities for creating value that would naturally generate it. When you shift from asking to pulling, you become available to receive the universe's guidance about how to create the financial reality you desire. Not through cosmic intervention, but through the natural intelligence that emerges when you align with the principles that govern abundance. Let me tell you what starts to happen when you really embody this understanding. People start offering you opportunities you never would have imagined. Resources start showing up exactly when you need them. Ideas start flowing that naturally lead to financial gain. And none of it feels forced or manipulative or desperate. It feels like the natural expression of consciousness creating through you. This is quantum wealth generation. Not because you're manipulating quantum mechanics, but because you're aligning with the quantum nature of consciousness itself, which is always creating, always expressing, always flowing toward greater complexity, greater beauty, greater value. I'm curious, have you noticed moments in your life where money seemed to flow effortlessly when you were deeply engaged in something you loved? Share that experience in the comments below. These stories remind us all of what's possible when we align with our natural creative flow. Now, I want to address something that might be coming up for you as you listen to this. You might be thinking, but I've tried focusing on value creation before. I've tried being of service, and money still didn't flow. Here's what was probably missing: coherent assumption. You were focusing on creating value, but you were still assuming that money might not come. You were giving from a place of hoping to receive, rather than giving from a place of knowing that financial flow is inevitable when you're truly aligned with value creation. Coherent assumption means that every cell in your body, every thought in your mind, every emotion in your heart is aligned with the truth that money flows naturally when you're creating genuine value. Not hoping it will, knowing it does. This knowing isn't something you have to work up or convince yourself of. It's something you recognize as already true when you really understand what money is. Crystallized attention flowing toward consciousness that's creating value. Now, what we've explored today about shifting from asking to pulling frequencies is just one layer of what I call the complete system of conscious transmission. While we've focused specifically on money consciousness, there's an entire framework of 9 master frequencies that govern how reality responds to your energetic broadcast. From the survival static that keeps most people trapped in scarcity loops, to the ascending currents that naturally generate effortless creation. If you're ready to explore the complete quantum foundation behind not just financial flow, but all reality creation, you'll find the step-by-step practices for embodying each frequency in my book, Beyond the Frequencies, a Quantum Guide to Consciousness Mastery. It's linked in the pinned comment below. But for now, let's anchor this frequency shift we've been exploring together by making it real in your energy field. Take a moment right now and comment below with this phrase: I am aligned with the frequency that naturally generates abundance. Not because you're trying to manifest something by writing those words, but because saying it out loud, even in written form, is a conscious interruption in whatever frequency you've been broadcasting around money. It's a signal to the quantum field that you're ready to receive the financial flow that's already trying to reach you. As you write those words, notice what happens in your body. Notice if there's any resistance, any voice that says, "But that's not true for me right now." That resistance is just the old asking frequency trying to maintain itself. Breathe into it and let it dissolve. Now let's talk about what money pulling looks like in practical, everyday terms. Because this isn't just philosophical understanding. This is a complete shift in how you operate in the world. When you're in the pulling frequency, you stop monitoring your bank account with anxiety and start monitoring it with curiosity. You stop checking your balance to see if you have enough and start checking it to track the flow that you're generating through your value creation. When you're in the pulling frequency, you stop saying things like, "I can't afford that," and start saying things like, "That's not where I'm choosing to direct my resources right now." Can you feel the difference? The first statement assumes scarcity. The second assumes choice. When you're in the pulling frequency, you stop complaining about bills and start appreciating them as evidence that you have services and resources flowing in your life. You start paying bills with gratitude rather than resentment, because you understand that every bill represents some form of value you've received. When you're in the pulling frequency, you stop hoarding money out of fear that there might not be more, and you start circulating money with the understanding that circulation creates more circulation. You spend money joyfully, invest money wisely, and give money generously, because you know that money is energy, and energy that flows creates more energy. But perhaps most importantly, when you're in the pulling frequency, you stop making decisions from financial fear and start making decisions from creative possibility. Instead of asking, "Can I afford to do this?" you ask, "Will doing this create the kind of value that naturally generates the financial flow I desire?" This question alone will transform your entire relationship with money, because it shifts you from scarcity thinking to abundance thinking, from reactive thinking to creative thinking, from asking frequency to pulling frequency. Now let me share with you the most advanced money-pulling practice I know. This is for those of you who are ready to take your financial reality to the next level. Every week, identify one area of your life where you can increase the value you're creating, not to make money, but to align more fully with the creative intelligence that naturally generates abundance. Maybe it's improving a skill, developing a new capability, deepening a relationship, enhancing the quality of work you're already doing. Then, spend time each day focusing on that area with complete presence, complete attention, complete commitment to excellence. Not because you're trying to achieve something, but because excellence is the natural expression of consciousness when it's fully engaged. What happens when you do this consistently is that your capacity to create value begins to expand. And as your capacity to create value expands, your capacity to generate financial flow expands automatically. Not through force, not through manipulation, but through natural law. You become what I call a wealth generator, someone who creates more value than they consume, and therefore naturally attracts more financial flow than they need for their basic survival. This surplus isn't something you accumulate out of fear. It's something you circulate with joy, knowing that the more you give, the more you're able to receive. This is the secret that wealthy people know. Wealth isn't about having money. Wealth is about generating more value than you consume. Money is just the measurement system that tracks this exchange. When you understand this, you realize that generating wealth isn't about convincing anyone to give you anything. It's about developing your capacity to create value and allowing that value to flow into the world in ways that naturally generate financial exchange. But here's what happens at the deepest level when you make this shift from asking to pulling. You stop experiencing yourself as separate from abundance. You start experiencing yourself as abundance expressing through form. You realize that you're not someone who needs money. You're someone through whom money flows. You're not someone who lacks resources. You're someone through whom resources organize themselves for the highest good. This isn't spiritual bypassing or positive thinking. This is recognizing what's actually true about the nature of consciousness and its relationship to the material world. Consciousness is creative. Consciousness is generative. Consciousness is abundant. And you are consciousness expressing through form. When you really get this, not just intellectually, but in your bones, in your cells, in your direct experience. Asking for money becomes as irrelevant as asking water to be wet. Water doesn't try to be wet. Water is wet. Consciousness doesn't try to be abundant. Consciousness is abundant, and you are consciousness. Now, if what I'm sharing with you is touching something deep inside, something that recognizes this truth, even if your mind is still processing it, then I invite you to subscribe not just to this channel, but to this frequency. The frequency of abundance consciousness. The frequency of creative flow. The frequency of wealth that moves through you rather than towards you. Because here's what I know. The more of us who align with this understanding, the more the collective financial reality begins to shift. The more of us who operate from the pulling frequency rather than the asking frequency, the more abundance becomes available for everyone. This isn't just about your personal financial transformation. This is about contributing to a world where resources flow to where they can create the most value, where wealth is generated through service rather than exploitation, where financial abundance becomes the natural result of conscious contribution. Let me share with you what money pulling looks like at the highest level. At the highest level, money pulling is about becoming so aligned with your deepest gifts, so committed to offering what you uniquely have to give, so passionate about the value you're creating, that money becomes a byproduct of your self-expression rather than the goal of your efforts. When you reach this level, you stop thinking about money altogether. Not because you don't care about money, but because you're so engaged with the creative work that naturally generates money, that money takes care of itself. This is what I call invisible wealth generation. Wealth that accumulates naturally as a result of doing what you love, serving what matters to you, and expressing your unique gifts in ways that create value for others. But getting to this level requires a complete surrender of the asking frequency. It requires releasing every strategy, every technique, every method you've learned for getting money, and instead learning to trust the creative intelligence that flows through you when you're fully aligned with your purpose. This isn't easy for most people because we've been conditioned to believe that we need to work hard, struggle, and sacrifice to generate money. But the truth is, the harder you work to get money, the more you reinforce the belief that money is scarce and difficult to obtain. Real wealth comes through ease, through flow, through the natural expression of your gifts in service of life. It comes through what I call effortless creation, creating so much value with so much joy that abundance becomes inevitable. Now you might be wondering, how do I make this transition? How do I shift from asking to pulling? And the answer is simpler than you might think, but it requires courage. You start by making one small shift today. Instead of asking, how can I make money? Ask, what value can I create? Instead of looking for opportunities to receive, look for opportunities to give. Instead of focusing on what you need, focus on what you can offer. Make this shift not as a strategy to get money, but as an experiment in aligning with the natural laws that govern abundance. Notice what happens to your energy, your creativity, your sense of possibility when you operate from this different frequency, and be patient with the process. You're rewiring patterns that may have been in place for years, decades. But every moment you choose pulling over, asking, every moment you choose creating value over seeking reward, every moment you choose to align with abundance consciousness rather than scarcity consciousness, you're building the momentum that will transform your entire financial reality. Here's what I want you to understand. You don't need anyone's permission to start operating from the pulling frequency. You don't need anyone's approval to start creating value. You don't need anyone's validation to start generating abundance through the natural expression of your gifts. The quantum field is responding to your frequency right now. The universe is organizing itself around the energy you're broadcasting right now. Your financial reality is reflecting your consciousness right now. So the question isn't, when will my financial situation change? The question is, what frequency am I broadcasting right now? And is it the frequency that naturally generates the financial flow I desire? If the answer is no, then you have the power to change it in this moment. Not by asking for something different, but by aligning with the consciousness that naturally creates what you desire. This is your invitation to stop asking for money and start pulling it into your reality through the natural magnetism of aligned consciousness. This is your invitation to stop waiting for external circumstances to change and start becoming the kind of person through whom abundance naturally flows. This is your invitation to remember what you really are. Not someone who lacks something, but consciousness itself, expressing through form, creating through love, and generating abundance as naturally as breathing. Take a moment right now and drop one word in the comments that captures the energy you're choosing as you step into this new relationship with money. One word that represents your intention to align with the pulling frequency. This isn't just a comment. It's an energetic signature to the quantum field, a declaration of your readiness to receive the abundance that's already flowing toward you. And if you're feeling called to stay connected to this frequency, to continue exploring the intersection of consciousness and abundance, then subscribe not just to stay informed, but to stay aligned. Subscribe to remain coherent with the understanding that you are not separate from what you seek. You are that which you seek, expressing through form. Because here's what I know to be true. The more of us who embody this understanding, the more the world reflects that truth. The more of us who generate wealth through value creation rather than manipulation, who create abundance through service rather than scarcity, who understand money as energy rather than as object, the more we contribute to a world where financial flow serves the highest good of all. But let me take you even deeper into this understanding, because there's a level of money pulling that most people never discover. A level where financial flow becomes so natural, so effortless, so aligned with your being that it feels like breathing. This is what I call quantum wealth consciousness, a state where you're not just creating value and receiving money in return, but where you become a conduit for the universe's intelligence to express itself through economic flow. You become what I call a wealth catalyst, someone whose very presence and way of being catalyzes abundance for everyone they touch. Here's what happens when you reach this level. Money starts flowing to you through channels you never could have imagined. Opportunities arise that seem almost too good to be true, but they keep showing up because you're vibrationally aligned with the frequency where these possibilities live. People start offering you things, partnerships, investments, gifts, resources, not because you asked for them, but because your energy naturally draws support from the field. But most importantly, you realize that money was never the real goal. Money was always just the tracking system for something much more profound. Your capacity to serve as a channel for creative intelligence to flow into the world through you. Let me explain what I mean by this. Every time money flows to you, what's really happening is that the universe is saying, yes, keep doing that. Keep expressing through that channel. Keep offering that gift. Keep creating that value. Money becomes feedback from the field about how well you're aligned with your deepest purpose. This is why people who chase money for its own sake often feel empty even when they accumulate it. They're missing the real conversation that money is trying to have with them. Money isn't saying you're successful. Money is saying you're useful. You're creating something the world needs. Keep going. When you understand this, your entire relationship with money transforms again. You stop seeing money as a reward for good behavior and start seeing it as communication from the universe about your alignment with purpose. You stop trying to get money and start trying to decode what money is telling you about how to express your gifts more fully. This creates what I call the purpose abundance loop, a self-reinforcing cycle where the clearer you become about your purpose, the more abundance flows, and the more abundance flows, the more you're able to express your purpose. It's a spiral of increasing alignment between who you are and what you're here to give. But accessing this level requires something that most people are afraid to do. You have to be willing to follow your deepest inspiration, even when it doesn't make logical sense from a financial perspective. You have to be willing to trust that the universe knows how to support you when you're truly aligned with your purpose, even if you can't see the path from where you are to where you want to be. This is what I call inspired action. Action that emerges not from your mind's analysis of what should generate money, but from your heart's recognition of what wants to be expressed through you. Inspired action often looks risky from the outside, but it feels inevitable from the inside. Most people resist inspired action because they can't see how it will pay the bills. But here's what I've learned. Inspired action always leads to financial flow, but rarely in the way you expect. The universe is much more creative than your mind's limited projections of how money should come. Let me share with you a practice that will accelerate your ability to receive and follow inspired action. Every evening, before you go to sleep, ask yourself this question. What wants to be expressed through me tomorrow that would serve the highest good? Don't think about the answer. Don't analyze whether it makes financial sense. Just ask the question and let it drop into the deeper intelligence that operates beyond your thinking mind. Then, pay attention to the first impulse you have when you wake up. That impulse, however small, however seemingly insignificant, is often the universe's guidance about how to align more fully with the flow that generates abundance. The key is to follow that impulse without needing to understand where it's leading. Trust that consciousness knows how to create the resources you need when you're truly serving life. What's one small action you could take tomorrow that feels inspired rather than forced? Drop your intention in the comments. Sometimes stating our inspirations aloud helps crystallize them into reality. Now, there's something else that happens when you reach this level of wealth consciousness that I want to prepare you for. You start to realize that your financial abundance isn't separate from your spiritual development. It's an expression of it. Every level of wealth you're capable of receiving corresponds to a level of consciousness you're capable of embodying. This is why lottery winners often lose their winnings within a few years. They received money that was beyond their consciousness level, and since consciousness always creates its own reflection, their reality reorganized itself to match their actual vibration. But this also means that every expansion in your consciousness creates space for greater financial flow. Every limitation you release, every fear you transform, every way you learn to trust life more deeply opens you to receive more abundance. This is the real secret of sustainable wealth. It's not about learning techniques to get money. It's about evolving your consciousness to the level where the wealth you desire is a natural expression of who you are. And this evolution happens through what I call abundance initiations, experiences that challenge you to trust life more deeply, to release control more completely, to serve something greater than your personal needs. These initiations often come disguised as financial challenges. You might lose a job, face an unexpected expense, or watch an investment fail. But if you understand what's really happening, you realize that these experiences aren't punishments. They're opportunities to release whatever beliefs, patterns, or energies are preventing you from receiving the next level of abundance. The question during these times isn't, "Why is this happening to me?" but "What is this experience inviting me to release so I can receive what's trying to come?" When you ask this question with genuine curiosity rather than resistance, you often discover that you've been holding on to some form of scarcity consciousness that was blocking your flow. Maybe it's the belief that you have to struggle to deserve money. Maybe it's the fear that if you have too much, others will have too little. Maybe it's the unconscious pattern of self-sabotage that kicks in whenever things start going too well. Whatever it is, the financial challenge is creating space for you to see it, feel it, and choose something different. And the moment you make that choice, the moment you release the pattern that was limiting your flow, abundance rushes in to fill the space you've created. This is why some people experience their greatest financial breakthroughs right after their greatest financial challenges. The challenge cleared out the old patterns, and the breakthrough is life rushing in to show you what's possible when you're operating from a clearer frequency. But here's what's beautiful about this process. Once you understand how it works, you don't have to wait for external challenges to evolve your consciousness. You can consciously choose to release the patterns that limit your abundance before life has to create circumstances that force you to release them. This is what I call voluntary evolution, consciously choosing to grow, to expand, to release limitations, not because you have to, but because you're excited about what becomes possible when you do. Here's how you practice voluntary evolution in relationship to money. Every month, identify one belief, pattern, or way of being that you sense is limiting your financial flow. It might be the tendency to undercharge for your services. It might be the habit of spending impulsively when you're stressed. It might be the reluctance to ask for what you're worth. Then, instead of trying to force yourself to change this pattern, get curious about what it's protecting you from. What are you afraid would happen if you released this limitation? What are you trying to control by maintaining this pattern? Once you understand what the pattern is protecting you from, you can have a conversation with that part of yourself. You can acknowledge its concern, appreciate its intention to keep you safe, and then gently invite it to consider that there might be a way to be safe while also being abundant. This approach honors the wisdom of your protective patterns while creating space for new possibilities to emerge. And when change comes from this place of inner collaboration rather than inner force, it tends to be sustainable and joyful. Now, let me share with you the most advanced wealth consciousness practice I know. This is for those of you who are ready to embody wealth at the deepest level. Start seeing every person you interact with as an opportunity to create value. Not in a manipulative way, not with the agenda of getting something from them, but with genuine curiosity about how you might serve their highest good. When you're talking to the person at the grocery store, when you're on a call with a colleague, when you're spending time with family, practice being present to how you might offer something of value in that interaction. Maybe it's your attention, your appreciation, your insight, your energy. Maybe it's something more tangible. The specific form doesn't matter. What matters is that you're constantly looking for ways to give something of value to every person you encounter. Not because you expect anything in return, but because this practice trains you to operate from the frequency that naturally generates abundance. When you do this consistently, something extraordinary happens. You start to discover that there are infinite opportunities to create value in every moment. You realize that wealth isn't about finding the one perfect opportunity. It's about recognizing that every moment is an opportunity to align with the creative intelligence that generates abundance. And as you align with this recognition more and more deeply, people start to experience something different when they're around you. They feel more alive, more inspired, more connected to their own creative power. And they naturally want to support you, collaborate with you, create opportunities with you, because being around you is valuable. This is what true wealth magnetism looks like. It's not about attracting money to yourself. It's about becoming someone whose presence naturally generates value for others and allowing the financial flow to be a byproduct of that service. But here's what happens at the very deepest level of this work. You start to realize that you're not actually creating value for others. You're helping others recognize the value that's already within them. You're not giving them something they don't have. You're helping them remember what they've always had. This recognition completely transforms how you understand your role in the economic system. You realize that you're not here to compete for scarce resources. You're here to help awaken the creative capacity that exists within every person, knowing that when everyone is expressing their gifts fully, there's more than enough abundance for everyone. This is the vision of economy that wealth consciousness is moving us toward. An economy based not on scarcity and competition, but on creativity and collaboration. An economy where everyone's success contributes to everyone else's success, because we're all expressions of the same creative intelligence. And every time you choose to operate from the pulling frequency rather than the asking frequency, every time you choose to create value rather than extract value, every time you choose to trust the abundance of life rather than the scarcity of fear, you're contributing to this transformation. Your personal financial evolution isn't separate from the collective evolution of consciousness on this planet. They're part of the same movement toward a world where resources flow to where they can create the most love, the most beauty, the most service to life. Consider watching this video every morning this week to let these concepts settle into your consciousness at the cellular level. And if someone in your life is struggling with financial stress or limitation, share this with them, not just to help them, but because explaining these quantum principles to others actually deepens your own embodiment of abundance consciousness and creates an energetic ripple that accelerates manifestation for both of you. Now, as we come toward the end of our time together, I want to leave you with this understanding. Everything I've shared with you isn't actually new information. It's remembering what you already know at the deepest level of your being. You came into this world as an expression of the same creative intelligence that creates galaxies, that grows forests, that orchestrates the migration of birds across continents. That same intelligence is available to flow through you in every moment, creating whatever you need to serve your highest purpose. The only question is whether you're available to receive its guidance, whether you're willing to trust its wisdom, whether you're ready to let it express through you in ways that generate the abundance you desire. Money pulling isn't a technique you learn. It's a capacity you already have that you're remembering how to access. It's the natural result of aligning with who you really are and allowing that truth to express itself through your participation in the economic flow of life. Your transformation isn't just about you. It's about the contribution you make to the collective awakening of abundance consciousness on this planet. You came here not to ask for anything, but to give everything you have to give. And in that giving, in that full expression of your gifts, in that complete alignment with the creative intelligence that flows through you, you discover that abundance isn't something you receive, it's something you are. Stop asking for money. Start pulling it into your reality through the natural magnetism of consciousness, aligned with its creative power. The field is ready. The universe is ready. The question is, are you ready? Understanding how consciousness creates financial reality is just the beginning. What happens when you realize that everything you think, say, and observe is actually reinforcing the reality you experience? The observer voice reveals how your internal dialogue becomes your external world, and why changing what you say to yourself changes everything you see. This principle transforms not just your money consciousness, but every aspect of how reality responds to you.